makes a great photo? And also ask the question, what is a great photo? Those two things go hand in hand, and that's essentially objective and subjective. So when it's objective, it really is just a thing. It's true. And when it's subjective, it really depends upon the viewer to make it great or not. So there are great photographs and there are great photographs. So I want to just start off with setting the bar very high. Sebastião Salgado, who passed away less than 2 months ago, is a Spanish photographer that is a photographer's photographer. His work transcends the medium of photography and it becomes really something else. So I wanted to show 4 pictures from the great Mr. Salgado. And to start off with, if anyone likes to do wildlife photographs, well, this is the bar. This is what you want to do when you shoot wildlife. This photograph is just stunning. I'm sure everyone can agree with me on that. Moving along, these penguins traveling into the ocean. Um, just take a look at that one, the first penguin that's in mid-flight, mid-jump, and really that's just Henry Cartier-Bresson's decisive moment. The other ones all in a perfect line, coming down, waiting to get in the water, moving through that negative space into the complicated water, and those icebergs, those in the distance there, making up the glacier. I guess a glacier, an ice sheet that these penguins are making their way through. This is work that Sebastian Salgado did for the Iraq and Kuwait oil fields that were on fire in 1991 during the Operation Desert Storm, and when they were trying to get control of these oil fields that I believe, as Saddam Hussein's forces left Kuwait, that they lit on fire or went on fire anyway. A war in the Middle East, who would have thought it? But this is an incredible photo. It says so much. It's so aesthetically pleasing. It's so compositionally perfect, and it tells such a story. And the texture and everything is just so absolutely incredible. And this is a photograph that I remember first seeing in the 1980s in magazines for photography back in the day before the internet. And this was works in a mine called Plina. I'm not too sure of the name of it. But what just stunned me was that this is what a photograph can be. And let that sink in for a second. I mean, we all make photographs. We really aspire to make great photographs. But this one, telling a deep story, having amazing subjects, uh, compositionally, texture, everything is just here. It's just an amazing photograph. So let's just talk right off the bat and go into the popular commentary on what is a great photograph. And I'm going to start this off with evoking the great Jay Mizell. And Jay Mizell says it's 3 things. It's light, gesture, and color. Now, I'm going to agree with Mr. Mizell on light. I mean, photography is painting with light. We need light. Gesture brings life to the photograph. It's very important that there is gesture. Color, I would have to say this is a modern interpretation. Jay Mizell studied color with some of the greats. Um, this is not always true for photography. So I'm going to argue with this one and say that Jay Mizell, that indeed these 3 are there, but when we deal with black and white, it changes the game a little bit. This is Bernadette Johnson. She's a faculty member for a San Diego art school. Not too sure of the name. She says that it's 4 things. So she's adding 1 thing on top of Jay Mizell: lighting, composition, timing, gesture. So this is pretty amazing. Bringing in timing. So now you're reflecting the real world. A great photograph is stopping time, essentially, at the exact right moment. Of course, gestures there. She also adds composition, and I think that Jay Mizell takes composition for granted. I'm going to say, he may even argue that a mixture of light, gesture, and color is composition. But she adds composition to it, and I would have to agree, composition is really key. This is Todd Vorenkamp. Todd Vorenkamp is a photographer and a writer, and he comes up with a number of them. He comes up with 7 of them. So he adds line, shape, form, texture, color, size, and depth. I think it's really interesting to add size in. I don't necessarily understand how size comes into a great photograph. Um, I could don't quite understand that one. Depth is for certain. Think of your some of the best films, movies, cinema. It draws you in so that you're in that environment. A photograph should do the same thing. It's got to work a little harder because it's a single image. Shape, form, lines, all part of composition. Now, this is interesting. This is from the 7 C's of journalism. So they put it all into C's, very cute for journalism schools. Composition, contrast, cropping, candid, clarity, color, and cut line. So I think we know what all of these essentially are, but we want to just say what cut line is. Cut line is it's a 1 sentence description of the photograph for the editors to use, and it's an interesting addition to the 7 C's there. So that's what makes it a great photo. I would also beg to say on the cut line, I know that for those of you that participate in camera clubs, they'll have photo competitions, and frequently they'll ask for a title or a cut line of the photo. And that's I kind of think that's a little bit mean because if you look at a great photograph or a great painting, I believe that it should stand up on its own without having any words below it. That's just me. I find that a little abhorrent because that gives the advantage to the best photographer who happens to also be the best writer. Um, and I think that changes the game a little bit. But that's just my thoughts on it. Okay, so that's the popular commentary. That's what everyone's come up with. What I've been thinking about for a couple of years, and I want to add to everything, is I want to say that there's 21 elements of a great photograph. Excuse me. This is in alphabetical order, and we're going to go over it nice and quickly. All 20, and then we're going to do a special 21. Okay, so we'll start off again, alphabetical. None of these are more important than the other as we're describing them or they're laid out. Clues. Clues are signs, they're details. These are help telling the photographic story. It's not necessarily the story. Clues are things to help you identify place, help you identify who the subjects are, and what's happening in the actual story. Composition. Now, composition is this is a catch-all for the rule of 3. It's also leading lines, it's horizons, it's the golden mean. It's some images can be just held up with a great composition, meaning that the rest of the 20 things that we're going to talk about just don't really show themselves up so well. But the composition actually saves the photograph. Color. I'm going to put color in here because color, it can be richer or muted, but color mostly can be complementary. Color has to work. And I'm going to show a color photograph later on that I'm quite proud of. A color photograph that I made as a black and white guy. Execution. Now, this is another catch-all phrase. This is the way the photo is put together, it's processed, and essentially it's presented to you. So execution, having really good post-processing, really good printing, really good way to display the work, that all counts in execution. Execution is, it's the final, it's like, think of a gourmet dinner, and this is the plating. The plating is where the execution happens. Now the era, this is a temporal part. This is really important. This is, excuse me, essentially when was the photo made? Now photos age very well. So showcasing the era, it really can add a very successful element to the photograph, especially 20, 30 years later when cars looked a little boxier, 40, 50 years later, or in the past where cars in the photos look really cool because they're neat old cars. I personally look at the evolution of the taxi cab. essentially the urban taxi cab, the New York City cab, if you will. Remember, for so many years they were that cool 1950s style, and then they kind of started changing, and now they're like minivans. Edit. This is a big one. Edit is this the best photo that you made that you're showing? If chosen correctly, it may be the perfect shot, or it may be the shot that occurred before the one you picked, or it can be after the one. So it really depends in a sequence which one's the best, and that's a big. So the edit is really important. Okay, this is huge. This is gesture. Gesture is your hands, the facial expression, it's body language. Gesture is mentioned in almost all of the popular definitions of a great photograph. Gesture makes the photograph really come alive. Humor. Now, humor is a key to the great shots that are out there. Humors have to include irony. Everyone loves a good chuckle. So I'm a big fan of trying to get humor in there. And I personally think that humor is really hard to get. But if you want to see beautiful humor in a photograph, look at Elliot Erwitt's work. Elliot Erwitt is the photo god of humor. Okay, investment. This is a viewer's interest into the goings on of the photograph. How invested are you? If you're someone who cares about fashion and doesn't care about transportation, you may walk right by a really good looking Corvette on the street or a really well designed car. So you just don't have an investment in that. So, in the subjective part, the investment of the viewer is really important to the photograph. And I would also say that if you want to turn this around and say, what about me? Your investment in the photograph, how much time and effort you put into investing in this photograph is very important. So investment, it has both a outward and an inward meaning. Okay, interesting. This is a critical one because a photo must be interesting or the viewers are simply not going to look at it. There's an old adage in photography, I don't know who said it, but if it's not interesting, get closer. So sometimes when you're working a subject and the subject may be getting lost in the background, or the story, the voice, the goings on of the photograph are getting lost, just simply get closer. Light and shadow. Light and shadow is a decisive element and it registers very well with viewers. Now, it's not necessarily limited to black and white. You can have light and shadow and color. Of course you can. But light and shadow for black and white is super important. Light and shadow is where the whole photograph lives in black and white. Memory. Does the image trigger a memory? Now, when I see a vintage Mustang, it definitely brings memory of my mom's car that I grew up with. I was born in 67. She had a 66 and a half notchback aqua blue Mustang. And man, I remember that. I remember that car so well. She had seatbelts put into it. It's pretty cool there. Then there's also nostalgia, nostalgic. So the difference between nostalgic and memory is quite great. Because nostalgic, first off, we all love nostalgia. It makes us feel good. It's like the good old times. Now memories can be bad, but nostalgia is always comforting. So I think it's interesting if you can incorporate something that triggers a memory, which is again on the subjective side, but if you can make it nostalgic, that's always that's always a win. The place. A great photo should illustrate where it was made. That is, Bob Chris taught me that. That's the sense of place. The sense of place. You should have visual clues in a photograph that when someone looks at it, they can place where it is. Could be the moon, could be Japan, could be New York City, could be Paris, could be Tulum, could be all these places, but you should have indicators to allow showing where it is. Okay, the other one is a little further out. This is patterns. Repeating patterns are very pleasant to look at, and they really make a nice aesthetic. I was turned on to patterns first with Art Wolf's work. Art Wolf was shooting herds of zebra, and the patterns were absolutely stunning. You saw beautiful patterns in the faces of all the of all the seals in that Sebastian Salgado photo I showed earlier. Positive and negative space. It's a design element, but it serves as a map, as geography for your actual image. Having positive and negative space makes your viewer's eyes dance throughout the photograph to kind of understand it. Very important positive and negative space. It makes it helps with tension and it makes the photograph stand out. Story. This is a big one. What's going on in the scene that you've photographed? Someone should be able to look at that photograph, observing the clues, being pleased by the composition, being interested in what's going on, and then actually finding out what is really going on, the story behind the photograph. You don't have to say that with the cut line. If you do that properly with clues and actually having a story that can be told and is a very cognizant story, it will actually give so much life to the photograph. If you're a journalist, story is quintessential to everything you're handing in. You need to absolutely have context and have uh, all the elements to actually tell a story that you've been assigned to tell, essentially. Tension is the mortar that visually connects the design elements together. So when you have great bright sun and you've got underneath a palm tree and you've got a figure laying out in the sand, very calm, and there's a very soft tide that's there, you need some tension. And that tension can be maybe looking further and uh, there's a wild dog that's in the bushes, or maybe the person that's laying out the figure has something really an interesting story to tell. Tension holds all that together. And very quickly, I was going to mention, I was at a museum one time with my wife, with the painter Jean Miot, who has passed. And at Jean's museum, they had other artists come. And Jean is standing in front of this big painting with my wife. And he's looking at it and he's thinking and he kind of shakes his head and he says, "No tension." I'll never forget that moment. At that point, I understood exactly what tension was. The last one is Henri Cartier-Bresson's gift to us. It's timing. And I want to expand on Bresson's The Decisive Moment. The decisive moment is the perfect time that the shutter clicks and captures the scene in front of it. Essentially, that's what the decisive moment is. Timing also can play with shutter drag, or letting a shutter open for a period of time where the subjects are moving fast through the scene, or they're standing still and they're sharp, but the other people are moving quickly through the scene. So timing is an interesting way to look at a photograph. I tend to think that the decisive moment is the most important aspect. However, incorporating time into your photograph gives more depth to it, and it helps it out being a great photograph. Okay, we're come to the last one. This is not alphabetical order. This is an S. This is the most important part of your photograph. It's got to have a subject. What is the subject of your photograph? Sometimes a photograph can be so aesthetically pleasing that it carries itself. It has all other 20 things done so well that it carries itself. But in general, you need a subject. And there's another adage that goes, if you want to make a more interesting photograph, find a more interesting subject to photograph. So that's really important, your subject. And in conceptual photography, you can control that. And street photography, you have to find it. And in studio photography, you create it. So subject really comes in many different shapes, sizes, and forms. But let's look at the elements of the great photograph matrix. So this is what I like to call the great matrix. And what we've got going on here is we've got on one side, the left side, subjective, meaning that your personality, your own self can decide if these things are notable in the photograph, or they're important to the photograph, or they can be seen in the photograph. It's subjective. It's up to you to really decide that. The objective, I don't think we can argue. Either the timing is on, either it elaborates on when the time the photograph was taken, the era, the light, the shadow, the balance. Uh, Good composition is good composition, simple as that. Good, well executed photographs are well executed photographs. I don't think you can be subjective. You can't take a photograph and push pin it to a wall and call it done. Yes, you can do that, but it's not really helping the photograph anything. Having the photograph properly mounted and matted and framed, and then putting it up is definitely going to look a little bit better. Also, doing really good processing. You have to be good at Photoshop, Lightroom, or have a camera that just really makes great JPEGs, or you know what you're doing in post processing, or you know what you're doing in the darkroom. Those are all things that are really important. The subject is at the center of all this. The subject can be subjective and it can be objective, but it's the most important element. The different words that I have getting closer are going up and down from a simple on the lower part of the matrix going to more complex at the top part of the matrix. So does this actually help us make a great photograph? Well, what it does is it identifies the most important things that we really need to start incorporating into our photographs to make them great. Now, again, we're trying to make great photographs. We're not trying to make great photographs in capitals with an exclamation point. We do want to make great photographs in capitals with an exclamation point, but we need to continue making many great photos before we can get to one of those great photos. Okay, let's just talk now about some great photos that are out there. And let's start with this one of, this is not taken by a human. This is NASA's Lunar Orbiter 1, 1966. Why this is such an amazing picture. So you guys just to continue looking at this photograph for a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to come up with 3 of the 21, well, we're going to say 20. We're not going to say the subject. Oh, we can say the subject, but 3 of the 21 elements to make a great photo. Story, interesting, and composition. So here's the story. This is a freaking lunar orbiter that's been sent to the moon. The foreground is the moon because it's a lunar orbiter. And in the background is Earth. It's the first photograph taken of our planet that wasn't taken on our planet. I'm also going to say the composition is pretty cool because the composition lets identify place, the way it slides across that moon. Boy, that Orbiter 1 did a pretty damn good job. A couple of years later, it's done with a human, and it's done with a much better imaging system. I do believe this was a Hasselblad camera that took this photograph, and this is 1968, Bill Ander, and this is color. And there's the first time that we're seeing Gaia, Terra, our home, our planet, Earth. It's pretty amazing. Okay, let's go back to Earth, shall we? Let's go to Ansel Adams, one of his most famous photographs, Moonrise over Hernandez. I'm going to go with, on this one, the composition is outstanding. Having the moon rising up there in that sea of darkness, space. The composition is absolutely perfect. The place is interesting. The place is, it's a New Mexico. It's a Pueblo. And then, of course, this doesn't do it any justice, but I'm going to throw execution as the other part that's amazing, because if you've ever stood with your nose 12 inches away from an Ansel Adams photograph, you will know that the printing is absolutely stunning. Now, you're looking at this through the internet, through a Zoom, and you're looking through a web size one I picked up of Moonrise over Hernandez. So the execution really doesn't do justice. But trust me, had you been looking in a gallery at this silver print, you would be stunned. This is a lesser known Robert Frank image. Robert Frank is represented uh, by the Robert Mann Gallery here in New York City, and they had acquired this image and put it out in an email, and I was stunned by it. This is work that Frank did of the 1950s, and he was photographing Black motorcycle culture. So motorcycle culture really evolved after World War II, returning vets, and this is a subculture of motorcycle culture. This is Black motorcycle culture. And I think the gesture is amazing with the both eyes looking down in the same direction. It just has such a warmth to it. I think the era in question also really brings something to it. The era is supported by the shooting on film that it has a film look that Mr. Frank used, of course, like a shooter. The vintage Harley, of course. Everyone in the back just has a vintage look, the era. And then the story, the fact of like a Black motorcycle gang of the 1950s. Nothing says that's what it is aside from me telling the story, But I think if you look at it really close, you're going to come to that same conclusion that this is a black motorcycle culture of the 1950s, especially with that hat that the main male subject has. Okay, I'm going to go to the next image, and I've shown this before, and I've talked about it frequently, and I believe that we should always be genuine to ourselves. And this is an image that uh, really affected me deeply. This is Richard Avedon, Nastasia Kinski, and the Serpent, which was shot in the late 70s, early 80s. I think 1981, 80. Not too sure of the age on it, but it's one of the most known images because it was a poster house favorite, and this image was always seen in framing shops and poster shops, and it's an absolutely stunning image, pre-Photoshop. So let's just talk about what's going on here. This is the amazing Nastasia Kinski, photographed by Richard Avedon, who is foremost a fashion photographer, a portrait photographer, and he is my Zeus Odin of the pantheon of photography. And what we've got is a serpent that is a python that's on her, and he captures it right when that tongue comes out. She had to sit for 2 hours on a cold concrete floor while this serpent, the handlers were trying to get it perfectly wrapped around her. And I love the negative space up on top. I love the tension that's in the photograph. I love the story. I love the composition. I love the execution. I like the clues, and there's a really weird clue that's happening here. She's actually pregnant at this moment, and you can kind of see in the photograph that she's got a little baby body going on there, a lady bump, a baby bump, and I think that like interesting the snake, the fact that she's pregnant, who's the father of the baby. This is Eve and the serpent. I mean, this is just so much going on with this photograph. It's so amazing. It's a great photograph. Okay, I just want to continue on with my teenage years, and I want to move on to an image that I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 57 years old. That many of my friends, boys, not too much the girls, but the boys in high school had, and it was yes, the famous Bruce McBroom photograph of Farrah Fawcett. And I'm going to include this in here why this is a great photograph. And I'm not going to allow anyone to say it's a sexist photograph and you shouldn't be showing it. It has a great merit, this photograph. It happens to be one of the best selling all time posters, was the Farrah Fawcett poster. But let's talk about why this photograph is a great photograph. Well, it's nostalgic. It's Farrah. I was a big Logan's Run fan. That was Farrah's first movie after this poster came out. Farrah was, of course, in Three's Company, so it triggers what we got. Charlie's Angels, not Three's Company. You're right. Wait, no, Carol Hop. Farrah Fawcett. You're right. Suzanne Summers was Three's Company. Thank you, Carol. You're right. Charlie's Angels. So it triggers all this nostalgia, and it just kind of, makes me giddy in a Jack Tripper sort of way. Gesture. Her pose is really iconic. Um, the curly hair, that smile. That's a 1970s sex symbol smile, is what that is. They don't smile like that in the 2020s. I also want to talk about the color on it. The color is extremely well styled and complementary to each other. And also, I want to talk about the simplicity of that color. So, the background is a serape. A serape is a Mexican blanket, essentially. And that's what's being held up by the assistants. Nice, quick shot. Also, some other things too. It's not a two piece, it's a one piece. So, there's a little bit of modesty going on. I also like the shape of the arms and the fact that there's an elbow cut off and there's also a wrist cut off. I mean, technically, these are big problems with a composition, but I see no problem with this shot of Farrah. Okay, everybody. I know it's hot. We saw some steamy photos. Let's keep the fire going, but bring it to a, a fine art context. This is Sean Kernan's work. Sean is one of the instructors and faculty at the retreat in the woods. Sean is a wonderful conceptual photographer, advertising editorial, There is nothing that Sean can't do with a plum. This is an interesting shot with the hand over the book that's on fire. It's from a series that he did called The Secret Books. And it's pretty complex photograph. There's a lot going on. It's interesting. The execution is really superb and it has gesture. Okay, let you guys chew on that one for a little bit. Something totally different. Now, after subject, the edit is extremely important. So I want to show you some stuff that's taken from a recent street photography work, and I want to show you how I edit work. And remember before, when we went over the 20 in detail, we did say that editing is something that is really important because if the right photograph is not presented and shown, then it doesn't matter. It just got lost in the files. It just didn't get seen. So this is the method that I use is first for digital photography or analog photography. My analog photography now I always get scanned, so I open it up a into Bridge, and I will do ratings, and I'll go over the photographs, and I'll start with like generally my ratings are 1 through 3, and then I'll let it sit for a while, and I'll go back and I'll try to take those 1 through 3s and see if I can get some 4s and 5s in there. Maybe a 5 stands out right away. I edit the photos down to usually around like about a top 40 to a top 50, 60 images for about a week's worth of work. For a single photo shoot, I can do this editing in mere moments, maybe 10, 15 minutes if I really take my time. Take each photo, I open them up, I play with them in Adobe Raw, and then I save them in Photoshop, drop them into a folder. I execute that folder as well as a edited JPEG for putting on the internet. Those good images are now saved as TIFFs, put them onto a USB thumb drive, and I head over to my local CVS, which has a Kodak kiosk. I drop them into the kiosk. I do 4x6 with a white border. I go and I have lunch. I come back, I pick up my photos, I clean up the kitchen table, and I lay them all out. And I start moving them around. I start sequencing them. I start changing the photos a little bit. I start dumping ones, changing ones, moving them around, making essentially a reject pile. My goal is usually to get down to 20 images. Um, from there, you lose the whole. This was a workshop, so 20 on a workshop is an actual incredible number. That's real good. In general, when I go out on a photo shoot, I mean, I'm more than happy if I come back with one image, if I'm lucky. Another thing with editing sometimes is that since you shot it, you really can't be objective. You need somebody else to be who isn't you. You're subjective when you're looking at your images, what you like. But how about someone else's subjectiveness to gain some objectiveness for you? This is my 89-year-old mother-in-law, Elvira. And Elvira, I asked her to take the images and lay them out. She put them in an order that she liked. Okay, let's go on to some more images. This was taken with a Nikon SP camera, which is a film camera with Kodak Tri-X film. Loaded it into that camera, and I took about 9 months to finish off a roll of 36. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I remember walking down the street when this photograph presented itself to me, and I stopped and made the photograph, and then I got very excited. I thought, this is amazing. There was a panda walking down the street towards me that was blind on a New York City street. I took one frame. So its story, it's interesting, and its place, because that is Madison Square Park below, right in the background where the vanishing point is. Um, Also, if you know Manhattan, we've got some scaffolding in the picture. Of course, there's scaffolding. And then I like that one figure off to the right who doesn't care. Typical New York. Okay, so I forgot I made this photograph, and when I had it developed, I finished off the roll. I was so thrilled to get this image out of it. It's a really a happy image for me. Note, it's not like the other images you're going to see because the other images were mostly shot with modern digital cameras and they don't have any grain or tooth on it like a Kodak Tri-X has. Okay, this is in St. Luke's. Uh, St. Luke's by the chapel. It's in the West Village. And it's just kind of a elderly woman making her way through the park. She was happy. I photographed her from a couple different angles, really invested the time and effort in it. I like this one a lot. I think it's a great photograph. And I don't know who she is, but it has a lot of emotion. Just that directions, that's the directness that's on her face. The story, an old lady moving through the park, taking her time. I like the composition a lot. That's actually a brick wall in the top center, and then it's just lots of foliage around. And I like that line of bushes that she's moving through. So that's kind of where I'm standing with that one. Um, it has a lot of motion. It's a old lady in the twilight of her life, moving through a beautiful park. Okay, this was shot in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris at our French Parisian Capture the Magic workshop. And everyone was shooting in front of this clock. It's really a very famous photograph. It's a landmark that's photographed. You can shoot through the clock and you've got really great scenes of Montmartre in the distance. But it was the magic captured by this girl who just kind of stepped up, and the fact that she had a beret on. When you're in Paris, the tourists, there's like a 50-50 chance that tourists are wearing berets. It's like a rite of passage. So what makes it great? What are the elements? Place, emotion, her wonderment of looking at Paris through that window. Uh, the light and shadow is really what makes the photograph tremendously. And I also want to throw out something. There is a mistake in this photo. I do believe the focus is really captured on the girder of the clock towards the center right. I think she's slightly soft. So that could be problematic, but I think the softness of the photo in general, it saves it and keeps it in the great territory, or at least definitely the very good. Okay, so it's Friday, it's Shabbos. When this is being recorded, you got to show the yeshiva in Williamsburg. And I photograph in Williamsburg quite a bit. And it's interesting because the subjects, the Hasidim, the Orthodox, the Satmar clan, is they're very cool to photograph. They look really neat. Um, they're very interesting. I like this photograph. I'm going to go beyond composition. It certainly has great composition, but I'm going to go with balance as well. There's a lovely balance to the photograph, the way that the picture kind of moves, very Edward Hoppian. I also like the gesture. And when I say gesture, let's just kind of look over these kids. Let's start from the left and work our way over. The kid who's hanging onto the railing, he's kind of cute. The other kids are playing with cardboard. They're just rolling around and fooling around with it. But let's go up the steps to the kid who's touching the he's touching the handle, the banister, and he's got his hand in his coat, sort of Napoleonic style, and he's looking right at us, framed by that beautiful hat, and of course those payas. The other guy's laughing, the other kid's looking at me like, look at that guy. He's taking our pictures. And then I love the kid who's sitting on the steps. That's the James Dean of the photo Jewish kids in the yeshiva. He's just cool hanging out. He's a smooth kid. And the other guy's like, oh, these kids, I got to get out of here. And then we have a pile of garbage. So balance, it's all there. Okay, POV, point of view. I'm throwing this in because POV right now is like the biggest catchphrase I'm seeing on social media. POV, me feeding my cat. POV, blah, blah, blah. So this is a little POV for you, how I interpret POV. This is an image of the descending God in Tulum. And I'll tell you, this is from our Tulum workshop, and we have a deal. We get onto the archaeological site first, and we can make our photographs before the crowd show up, which is really worth the price of admission right there, because you get some really neat, interesting photographs. Um, Photographing though the ruins, even though the subjects are so amazing, it's actually still quite challenging. And I was looking for a lot of design elements to bring into this. I also want to show a little bit of intimacy with it. So it's a photograph that works because it's cool. It definitely took some work to make the photograph, especially changing focus points and really using the space and trying to figure it out. On the other side of the temple is a cliff, and you can walk along the cliff, and this is what the back of the temple looks like. This is pretty cool in its own way. So this is a point of view showing the same place from front and back, and it really comes out dramatically different. So I was instructed by, once again, Jay Mizell, who I only disagreed with him once at the beginning of this presentation. But one of his tenets was that you should circle around, walk around the block, go behind the building, really investigate the place, the space that you're in, and see if you can find the best photograph. So I'm going to put these side by side. And what we're going to do is let's just kind of go over which one is your favorite. And if you want, you could drop your favorite into the chat or you could put it into the comments. And I'm going to say that my favorite is the one on the right-hand side out of the two. Now, I would say that it's interesting because it is a Mayan ruin from the 15th century. So era is tied into it. It's ancient. Well, I don't know, ancient, but it's very old. But I really think that balance, well, it does have a great composition. I think balance really comes in, especially with the position of that lone palm tree, that lone coconut tree that's in there. On the other one, I do believe that it maintains interesting because, again, it's a Mayan ruin. It's the temple of the descending god. I think that the composition here really comes into play because we're using some complex foreground going on, and also the era that it's taken in. The era, it just shows this ancient era, and also it's important era stays here because if there were tourists in bright red shorts and Teva sandals and big floppy hats, it would take away from the photograph tremendously and shock us out of the era. So those are the keys there. Feel free to put in the chat. I'll take a look at that, what everybody thinks, whether it's the photograph on the left, which is the front, or the photograph of the back, which is the rear. Okay, let's go back from the ruins of Tulum up to Coney Island, New York. This is the this is a very special. Coney Island has two really amazing photo events to go to. The first is this one, which is on New Year's Day. It's the polar bear plunge, and then you also want to go on in just happened last week. It's the mermaid parade, and that both happens at Coney Island. Photo-rich environments. So this is on New Year's Day. Sometimes it could be frigid cold. Sometimes it could be balmy. You never know. Here in the Northeast, I run a one-day photo workshop up here and do this. So let's look over this image and say that it's interesting, mainly because of the fox lady certainly makes it. The gesture, it's got a lot of gesture, a lot of bodies, a lot of movement, a lot of facial expressions, or an interesting stuffed animal expression. Uh, Composition really holds together on this. And I want to draw your eye to the left-hand part of the photograph and look at that perfect a triangle that points into the image right along the horizon line and into the one performer who does the balloons versus the sexy fox who's just kind of strutting. And then it just kind of continues on into the background with all those boats. Now, I did this presentation once before. This is the second version of it, and I love this photograph. And I was really looking at it, and there's, I think, a flaw in the photograph, and I'm going to be hyper. Look at her name is Lavinia Solano. She's the artist who does the inflatable balloons. Look right above her right eye, and you'll see there's a bird about to enter her head, and there's another seabird in the background, another seagull following in there. Boy, I would have liked that one seagull to be over a little bit and not be touching the curls of her hair. Yes, I'm a nitpicker, but you know what? When you see images big, things like that happen. I mean, we could live with it. I'll be darned if I could pull that out in Photoshop in a millisecond, but I'll be darned if I'm going to do it. Okay, this was taken with a Nikon ZF camera, digital camera. I had just gotten the camera, charged up the batteries, and it was on my way home from B&H Photo, and saw this woman walking with a big cross, and I was like, oh, okay, she's got a big cross. And New York City, things like that happen. And then I realized a block away that there's a church, and I knew that there was this Jesus statue. So, like a good young Jewish boy photographer, I go running down the street and line up my photograph as she walks into the image and crosses it and make my exposures on it. So this one has a story because it's Jesus. There's a girl walking with a cross. There's a lot of clues that happen here. The I will give you rest. And then if you look in front of the door behind the cross, that is a homeless person sacked out. And I even think that the street sign, no standing anytime, kind of conflicts and creates attention. And of course, the COVID sign shows the ravages of New York City COVID. And then an interesting girl walking with the cross. I like also the timing, the way her legs are spread across as she's striding across the view. Okay, this was made in Williamsburg as well, and this is a really fun photo. This was made with the Fuji X100 camera. It excels at low shutter speeds with a 6-stop in-camera stabilizer, allowing you to do great pans. This image is really comes together with the execution. It's just a well shot, well built out image. It's got an interesting story because it's a Jewish kid, Orthodox, who wants to resist technology, yet here he is on a scooter zooming through his neighborhood. And then the gesture, look at that foot that's up on the brake in the back, the look he's giving me, and the execution just makes it weird and very visually appealing. Great photo. Really happy when I made this one. Made the whole trip that day totally worthwhile. Okay, this was taken up on top of in the Montmartre neighborhood of Paris, and I want you guys to hang on this photo for a second because I you know, you have to be objective, and you also don't want you want to be humble. A knight's humility is one of its greatest traits. But I'm really stoked about this photograph. I think it's got everything going on. So pretty much I found the photograph with a 10 to 24 millimeter 2.8 lens on a Nikon camera. And I had it probably around 14, 15 millimeters, nice and wide. It was a relatively tight street. And just kind of read the photograph from left to right. You've got some interesting rectangular shapes. You've got some great shadows. Uh, in particular, you've got lines, and you also have the street artist Space Invader with one of his Space Invader street arts up on top of the photograph. You've got a doorway with a bunch of punk rock and sort of uh, stickers, an immense amount of detail sitting amongst this neutral negative space that is the walls. The walls have been whitewashed. There were other paintings that were there that didn't quite cover it up. You got this girl squinting in the sunlight at her cell phone, and then all of a sudden this guy just makes his way into the image, and he's in front of the light, so he just becomes a shadow. And there we go. It's got composition. It's got lots of clues, and it has execution. Now, where's the execution? I'm going to be honest with you. I worked on this one pretty hard in post, getting the line straight because it was shot with that 14-50 millimeter lens, which is not truly rectilinear. So I had to straighten out the lines a little bit and kind of made the whole picture work. Really happy with this one. Another banger from Paris. This is on the Seine. I invested about a half hour. We were walking to Notre Dame to get there early at 8 a.m. and be the first people in. Because always remember, folks, the early bird catches the worm. The prepared early photographer gets the great photo. And I saw this texture, and I saw these shapes, and I said, I'm going to come back to that photo. And I came back with the 24 to 120 lens on the Nikon Z9, and I stood there for maybe 40 minutes. I invested in it, but I got many different people going up and down the steps. But this kid running up in the red shirt really nailed it. So here was the timing, getting the photo right below that big white cover. The composition, having those rectangles move up across the photograph. The positive and negative space. That's what really makes it, especially the positive negative space in between his arms and his legs. That body language, that gesture, that body gesture is just perfect for positive and negative. Okay, we love humor. There's a little bit of humor here. Humor is kind of actually tough to find. That's a gift that you don't get too often. But this was shot with really nice quality film and an analog camera. It was shot with a Contax RX with Ilford 100 speed film. Not HP5. It was F-Pan. I can't remember. It said it's the 125 Ilford. Anyway, shot with film, so we get this really smooth transition, and yeah, it's just fun because it's got some humor in there. Funny dog with the furry feet. The execution works out. Telephoto lens, shot wide open. Dog is in focus. Background just smooths out with that nice Contax Zeiss lenses. Beautiful. We got gesture, the illustration of the dog. I was talking to the dog as I was making the photograph. A lot of fun. Okay, everybody. I'll have to ask everyone Who's a Game of Thrones fan? Who's an Excalibur fan? Let's get medieval on this. This is actually Gladiators NYC. They get together in Central Park on the first Saturday of almost every month, and they have a tourney. They beat each other. Um, I put this in here. I really I walked away from this photo shoot with like a lot of great photos, but I chose this one because I think it had the most elements of the 21. Okay, it's interesting. I mean, it's guys in armor. Memory. I'm going to give you the memory on this one because we've all the the Middle Ages have always been romanticized in Western culture. We're very familiar with the knight in shining armor, so it kind of triggers a memory. And then there's tension, and let's just look at the tension in this one. Let's start with the figures from the left-hand part of the photograph. The first guy with the battle axe, the first warrior. Look at the body language on him. He's kind of leaning back, like, "Yeah, I got this." Then we go to the second one, and he's just like, "You will not pass." And then we go the first one. He's got the long one. He's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna hang out here. And then I like the last one. He's got the with the mini shield. He's holding on to his gorget there. He's holding on to his codpiece. Um, so yeah, it's got tension. It's a lot of fun. Okay, this is photographed 2 years ago in Mont Saint Michel in the north of France in Normandy, and you know, I had a smile from ear to ear on my face when I was making this photograph because the tide was out and it becomes this great mud pit, and the kids are playing in the mud and they're having a blast. I'm photographing them. I'm having a blast. And then the seagull comes in, and the seagull's like, I'm going to have a blast and get in your picture. And because I was shooting with a power drive, I got a shot with that seagull in the exact perfect square. Look at that. If that seagull was anywhere else in this photo, you'd say, that's cool. But the fact that he's in that spot just really kind of nails it. I like the photograph so much that I don't even mind the fact that the girl has a Gap shirt on. So it's composition, it's gesture, it's timing, and I made a great photo. And I printed this big. It's such a stunning photo. I love it. That was outside the walls. This is inside the walls. This is on the way up to the chapel on the top of the uh, Mont Saint Michel, and I really kind of dig this photograph. This is another one. I was intent. I wasn't smiling. I was just cropping and composing this photograph. Like, holy shit, this is going to be a great photograph. And it's got composition, it's got gesture, and I'm going to give it place because it's obviously a very old place and it must be touristy, and it doesn't really look necessarily like an Asian place. So that's kind of what I pick up on the tourists. But I don't know. I could be wrong. I think it's got a bunch of the 21 that are in there, but it's neat. The composition really overrides and becomes pretty straight and center. All right, I love school buses. Who doesn't love a school bus? I love the excitement. Kids have a license to act up in any way they want when they're inside a school bus. And all you have to do is just basically look at them, make a funny face, and like, you think kids are yours. So I got this kid, he's just kind of like, this guy, if he's screaming or he's in the bus. And then look at the sister, look at the eyes of her, look like, oh yeah, you're having a good time. I got to sit next to this kid for the next hour. It's got gesture, it's nostalgic, but it's a school bus, and it's got emotion. That's really not much else in this image. It's got that. This is a similar image. This is taken in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I don't know if you can guess that it's Brooklyn, but what gives it away is that you've got the Hebrew lettering of the on the bus, and then you've also got the payas, the extra hair that the Jewish boys have when they get their head shaved when I think at 4 or 5 years old. That's when their payas start to show up. I like the fact that his hand is up there. Uh, it's got clues, it's got story, and it's got timing. The timing is being able to capture that bright background, which allows the silhouette of the boy to really show up clearly, especially the payas and the hair and the hands. Also, the other thing is the clues. Look at, we've got in the top left, emergency exit, and on the bottom, we've got the writing in Hebrew characters. It's almost sort of like, does this kid want to escape the bus, the conformity of the Hasidic religion? Or am I just reading too much into this? Well, that's the thing about, you can put clues, but clues don't always lead to the correct story. It won't be the first photograph that's been misinterpreted, but it's definitely a cool photograph in many ways. Okay, they say he doesn't shoot color, but we digress. I do shoot color. I shoot in RAW. So when I open up my images in Photoshop and Bridge, they show up in color, and then I quickly turn them to black and white. But this one I couldn't turn to black and white. I love this one so much. This is shot in Tulum. We have a street photography segment for the Tulum workshop, which, believe it or not, the street photography in Tulum City is really good, and so much good, in fact, that I've changed the schedule to add more time in Tulum town. But it's got great colors. The colors are fabulous. It's got light and shadow. And that's what light and shadow and color. And that's, I think, what makes it work so much, the contrast. And then it's got balance. Those power lines. And I think in Mexico, if you need power and like your friend Jose has power down the block, I think it's okay to take an extension cord and just run it, because there's cords everywhere in Mexico where cable and power is being distributed. I'm sure that can't possibly be safe, but it works. Okay, we've seen some great images. I hope you enjoyed the images. I've edited them down to a T. I've had Steve Simon help me with edits, and I've had Elvira, my mother-in-law, help me with edits. But I want to go back to our great matrix, our great photo matrix, and want to just basically, we've got all those elements which are really important. Again, the closer they are to the subject, the more importance they have. We've got them where they can be very detailed or they can be very simple. And we've got them where it's really up to you, or it's simply an undeniable fact that this is true. Your composition is really good. You got it right. But the surfboard rider is off the side of the picture. You got your timing wrong. Wah wah. So those are objective. You just can't really argue that. The one thing I'll say though is that there is a baseline to the grid, and that baseline for a great photograph is that it's got to have a story. It's got to be interesting. The subject has to be interesting. It's got to have
Hi.
good
Okay,
composition,
just finishing.
and it's also good to be well executed. So this
Okay.
is the baseline: story, interesting composition, and execution. I know I heard someone talking over that. Please make sure everyone is muted. This is live. Okay, so I want to bring us to a big question about the future. These are some predictions I have for how the great photograph is going to continue, especially in face of AI. I think that multimedia immersion as photography evolves is something that's going to be, we're going to we're going to use multimedia to get us closer into photographs. It's been happening since probably the 1970s, 80s, especially in documentary work. But now we're seeing VR. And I had a dream that I bought the meta glasses, and I wanted to open up a gallery in the metaverse, in the virtual world. And they don't have the resolution in VR to actually look at a photograph properly, so we can't do that yet. But it'll be there. Um, I also want to say that AI is going to be entering mainstream. Right now, we're in the early stages of AI, where everybody is either embracing it or they're resisting it. But no matter what, AI is going to play a role in image making moving forward, whether you like it or not. It will be there, and how it enters the fray will be interesting. Right now, we're in the guarded phase, but in 20 years, it'll be mainstream, and that's it. There's really no arguing that. I'm sorry if you don't like AI, but you know what? The daguerreotype photographer really didn't like the Kodak Brownie that allowed image making on the frontier to be done. So yeah, I think that out of the 21, we're going to be adding authenticity. I think that's going to join the great matrix. I think that the way to uh, differentiate from AI and not have it be part of your work is going to be the authenticity that you bring to the table, that you decide that when I show a photograph, it's only been cropped, there's a little bit of exposure modification to it, and that's it. I haven't done anything else. That's authentic. If you start incorporating AI into it, you're really going into conceptual, and you're changing the game a little bit. Okay, so that's what I got to say about that.